to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. I wrote something for you and me called 19 Reasons to Believe in the Afterlife. If you're currently on my email list, you would have received it before listening to the show. If you haven't received it and it's something you'd like to have, I invite you to go to the show's website, which is WeDon'tDieRadio.com, and click on the Insiders Club to receive it. I have now interviewed well over 200 people. I've spent 20 years of my life looking for evidence of the afterlife. And so what I decided to do is just break it down into 19 different reasons to believe. And I'm really proud of what I created, and I think it would help a lot of people. And just from the response I've already gotten, it's been great. One lady has even printed it, and she hands it out at the hospital she works at. So I think it just will help all of us to remember that there is a bigger picture to our lives. So now on to the show. Our guest is Melanie Alberts. She is a psychic medium and a spirit artist who is accredited by the Spiritualist National Union International, where she teaches an online development circle and philosophy class. Her popular Colors of Your Question approach to intuiting life's questions includes a unique piece of psychic art based on the past, present, and potential future of your life's question. Melanie's web presence includes a blog for developing mediums and a spirit art Facebook page. You can find out more on her blog, which is melaniealbertsmedium.blogspot.com, or her Facebook page, which is, well, you go to Facebook and type in Melanie Alberts Spirit Portraits. Now, to make it easy, if you just scroll beneath this episode, however it is you're listening to it, there's a live link that you can just click on to get right there. So I'd like to introduce you to her now. Melanie Alberts, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thanks for the invitation. It's such a joy to be with you.
It's a joy to have you, and thank you for the gift you sent me. Was it the colors of your question that you sent me?
I sent you a spiritual assessment.
That's what you wrote, but then you also drew something. Is that all part of it?
Oh, yeah. I can't help but draw. It's my thing. So what I did was had a little meeting with my guides and your guides, and they got together. And when I was inspired to sit down and tune into what they had to say, I did what they had to tell me, and I drew how I was guided and sent it on to you. So that's a thank you for having me on your show, for inviting me.
Yeah, well, it was really beautiful. And the spiritual assessment, the words that when your people talk to my people, were really spot on for me and my life and just what I needed to hear. So it's just a beautiful gift, and I get to share you in return.
Yeah. It's a reflection of your beauty, Sandra Champlain. So Your name is so lyrical. I love how it reminds me of my favorite drink, champagne.
Oh, not a problem there. I like champagne as well.
And, it's the same root as champions, too? Would that be the same root as champions? Is that the same root of the word? I don't know.
Yeah, just champion.
You're a champion.
Heck yeah. I'm a champion. Well, I think you are too, and I think we're going to be good friends based on our interactions thus far. But if you would, why don't you introduce yourself to our listener right now, and who you are, where you're coming from, and maybe a little bit about your past.
Well, I'd like to just introduce you perhaps to the spiritual story of me first. And it's like you. The reason why you're doing this show, and perhaps your listener, it is a realization that you and me, everybody out there, shares an eternal awareness. From my own personal experience through out-of-body and near-death experiences, which we can talk about a little later, I know our eternal nature is real. And what is temporary and unreal is the body, the mind, things that we can sense or perceive. And they're unreal in the sense that these thoughts and perceptions are coming and going. They're not permanent. They're unreliable. They're open to interpretation, like beliefs. And so many of us have our beliefs change over the years. But what doesn't change is what's at your core, your consciousness. It's what never dies. And because of what has happened to me, I've been on a bit of a spiritual quest to find out why, what is this? And I really believe that we all share the same consciousness at our deepest reality. And this is something that we can all feel right now. We can feel it as love. We can feel it as I am. It's what you've experienced your entire life. And unfortunately, the prevailing worldview that we have to deal with, which makes being a near-death experiencer and out-of-body experiencer so difficult, is that the prevailing worldview is of materialism, where matter is king. Things are it.
Right.
And things come first. We have to have more things. We have to have relationships, which are things. People are things, animals. We have to control. We have to, we see ourselves in other things. But there is this veiling of our true nature. So in these things, we feel separate from God. And this is where non-duality comes in. I've been studying it for the past few years. It really means not two, but it really just means that consciousness is all there is. God, source, the great spirit, whatever you want to call it, one awareness. Everything is a modulation of this conscious awareness. And I sincerely believe that is what we are. Growing up, my family was Roman Catholic, very hierarchical. It's a very ritualistic and traditional and a beautiful religion. It really is beautiful. They embrace things. They embrace rituals called sacraments. And of course, I don't know if you're a Catholic or not, but there's one where you, as a teenager, where you confirm your beliefs, confirmation.
Mm-hmm. Yep, went through it all.
Yeah. During my confirmation class, the cutest young priest, who all the girls had a crush in, came into the room. We all stood up. He was like, no, sit down, sit down. And he announced to us, look, kids, confirmation is a personal choice. And if you don't want to be confirmed, you don't have to. Seriously, the priest said that. I had never been so elated, but my mother had other ideas. And so when she came to pick me up, there was this huge argument. And I ended up feeling like a hypocrite getting confirmed. But I did it because I loved her, and she clung to the illusion that I was going to get married in the Catholic Church. It really meant a lot more to her than it did me. So I did it, but let's just say my fingers were crossed. And so, growing up, I had this religious upbringing, but because of what happened to me as a child, it never sat with me. In college, I discovered Unitarian Universalism, which really appealed to me because it was more intuitive and an experiential religion. Intuitive meaning, deep down what is true, and experiential. You just know from your experience that this is the truth, that God was not three, God was one. So in this way, I was kind of getting closer to where I am now. And I loved how they allowed people to come up to the front of the church and hold a candle and give out a concern. That was just mind blowing for
Oh.
somebody who was raised in the Catholic Church, where you had an authoritarian father who would smack you if you were noisy. You can't speak in church. So, that was greatly liberating. And then I was introduced to Zen Buddhism, and that strengthened my meditative practice. And from there, my path led me to spiritualism via the Spiritualist National Union International. And I got a really wonderful education in mediumship and really enjoyed the community. And then most recently, discovering a non-dual teacher who crystallizes how I feel for the most part. I've been reading his books and watching his YouTube videos. So I'm kind of back to feeling like a child, one with awareness and knowing that a genderless, dimensionless, all that is who we are and what we eventually dissolve into.
Wow, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we have this attachment to our personalities. And this is something that I've really noticed studying mediumship. Our prime goal as mediums is to prove the existence of eternal spiritual nature, that the personality exists after death. And that has been my experience. However, I think eventually we do dissolve into the oneness that is spiritual awareness, that is God. So that's something I'm still trying to come to grips with. I see us as like whirlpools in the water where, the water is flowing and then suddenly a whirlpool might form, but it's still part of the water and then disperses. And then downstream, another whirlpool might come up. So that's basically how I see that.
Melanie, can I ask a favor?
Sure.
Sometimes, well, very often, this could be a listener's very first show. And while it's great to get into some of the details, there are some grieving folks that are looking for some good reasons to believe that life after death is real. Would you mind giving maybe a couple of your stories, or even talk about maybe some of the spirit art that you do, and and then we can move back into some of the conversation
sure, absolutely.
I'd love to. Yeah, go ahead. I think stories help.
That is my story. My memories go back to being a toddler, but the most significant one that I don't remember was nearly dying at 18 months. And I was told I had scarlet fever, my temperature was dangerously high, and it must have been a really stressful time for my parents. But I do recall being in the crib, in the high chair, very early memories. And then when I was 4, my older sister, dropped me face down, and I had to go to the hospital. And I had an out-of-body experience while under anesthesia. I don't recall the accident, but what I do recall is floating above the operation table, above the bright lights, my little body under a blue sheet, and a couple of adults in masks working over me. I knew it was me, but at the same time, I knew I was this ageless awareness, and it felt incredibly calm and impersonal. So there I was, this really strong memory. And then I do remember being at home and telling my mother this, and her basically shooting it all down,
right.
saying, don't make stuff up, that kind of thing. So, that was something I've had to, work with my entire life. Having these urges to be spiritual and to do these things, but then, having people not confirm them.
Those darn people.
I know.
We're turning into those people that will confirm,
Yeah,
I know it's all shifting.
So when I was 6, my grandmother told me that she saw the ghost of her mother when she was about my age. And being the kid I was, just really interested in these kind of things, I prayed to see ghosts. I wanted to see them. And of course, I never saw them because what I was expecting was Casper or eerie, spooky ghouls at the foot of my bed. Didn't happen. But they found me. And at the time, we were living in Connecticut, in a rural area of Connecticut. And I spent my days off from school playing outside there, surrounded by nature, and without any agenda other than to give expression to my experience. I loved playing by myself because I wasn't by myself. I would see visions in trees and in the water, and I would talk to them.
Really?
I would talk to, there was a lady in the water, I'd talk to her, and I was told I was very imaginative, and, that's what I just felt it was my imagination. But I do feel that these were
people,
spirits. Yeah. At the age of 8, I think it was, I found a book my dad had hidden away from his own mother, an Edgar Cayce book on reincarnation. So this was something forbidden.
How cool. Yeah.
I know. And I invented a game I called Reincarnation where I could act out dying and being reborn. So that was the kind of kid I was. The sister that dropped me on my face was also a really good artist, and she taught me how to draw. But ever since I learned how to draw, the only thing I wanted to draw was people. So I practiced that over and over, and I would use this as a crutch because my family moved a lot. I went to like 12 different schools growing up. And so I would latch on to drawing as a way to comfort myself and to feel secure in a new environment. And I was always drawing faces of the people I saw in my mind's eye. However, occasionally other people, like kids or teachers, would check out what I was doing, and someone might say, "Hey, that looks like my grandmother," or someone else they recognize. And I'd be like, "Oh, that's a coincidence," kind of thing. It's like, this is just somebody I see in my head. So little did I know I was training as a spirit artist.
Right.
And so I grew up knowing things, drawing dead people. And so paranormal kind of experiences just kind of kept happening to me. One of the things I regretted not being a part of was my sister's seance with a friend of hers who channeled her grandmother. And this is when they were 14. And they were doing this channeling thing and talking. The grandmother was speaking in a language the girl didn't know, for one thing. And then she came and spoke in English and talked about the 7 cycles of heaven kind of thing. All these things my sister was telling me, I'm like, that makes sense to me. And something about it really resonated with me.
Who was doing the speaking?
A friend of theirs that they hypnotize. So one of my older sisters was really into self-hypnosis and hypnotism, and they hypnotized a friend of theirs, and she started channeling. Yeah. And of course, I never knew anything about spiritualism or mediums. This was all very new to me, and didn't know where to turn for more information on this. I don't think there really was any information on this in the mid-70s. So anyway, things like this would continue to happen. I'd get these experiences. I would know things, and friends called me a witch and that kind of thing, which I think a lot of people who are psychic have similar kind of experiences. One of the things that I think is really important to my life story is that I was very inclined to feeling disconnected and very much like I didn't belong on this planet. Like I was like, why am I even here? I don't even want to be alive. And so I had suicidal inclinations. And at one point in my 20s, I was very much in pain. I had back pain. And I just was, having these thoughts of suicide. And one day on the street where I was going to school in Boston, I looked across the street, and there I saw myself as an older woman. Now, this is not my imagination. This is I looked across the street and there I was. I just knew that was me. Silver hair, glasses, this kind of bemused smile. And it was so comforting because it was a message to me that I'm going to make it.
Wow.
I'm going to grow old. And then I was gone. But unfortunately, I, continued on and also had other, experiences. I married kind of in a way to find happiness in a relationship that did not work out. But I lived at the time with my first husband in a farm, and we were living in a trailer, building our own house, and my mother-in-law's dog, Bear, had gone missing a couple of days before. And I was sitting alone at our dining room table, just gazing out the window, when I felt a sensation like being pulled away from the scene, up through the roof, guided through the woods so quickly between the trunks of trees that it felt like I was going through a tunnel. I mean, it was like darting through the trees at super fast speed, and suddenly halting about 20 feet or so above this lost dog's body. And I could see the foam at Bear's mouth. He was obviously dead. And although I was astounded at what was happening, it felt oddly calm and familiar up there. And I knew, I was like, okay, where am I? And I noted where I was on the path, where his body was. And as soon as I made that realization where he was, I was zapped back into my body again. And I told my husband and his mom where Bear was, and we were able to go and bury him. And I feel like I was guided by Bear's spirit.
And that's where he was.
To find him. Yeah.
Wow.
That's where he was. And, it's experiences like that make you wonder, what the heck is going on? What is this, And I had no idea. No clue what this meant. And this marriage continued for another year, and it was I was in a lot of pain, and those feelings of suicide came back, and I did not experience killing myself. I only experienced the planning of my suicide attempt. I was in the woods and lying near a stream, thinking about how I was going to do it, when suddenly the scene shifted, my awareness shifted, and looking across the creek, there was this beautiful young woman in a robe. And she telepathically spoke to me in the most compassionate and beautiful way. And she said in so many words, "You have a reason to live. Your life is not your own." And I started crying, and it was very cathartic. And when I looked up, she was gone. The scene was normal. And I was able to get out of that marriage, and I was motivated to improve my life. And it was like a miracle.
Yeah,
to tell you the
definitely.
Truth, It was.
We hear of those earth angels and spirit guides, and there's even, I think, a Chicken Soup for the Soul written about these people that show up that no one's ever seen, that will step in just in those moments. But I love the message. Your life is not your own.
Oh, the compassion.
Yeah. The
compassion and the beauty that I was witnessing was overwhelming. And it was just like, why is there human life? Why is there pain? I've had so much pain. And that was one of the things I really wanted to find the answer to. And I believe that pain leads us to search for peace, and it allows us to find God because we have to lose ourselves first. I'm a poet, and I love writing poetry and reading poetry. And one of my favorite poets is Rabindranath Tagore. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1913. And he wrote, "When the string of the violin was being tuned, it felt the pain of being stretched. But once it was tuned, then it knew why it was stretched."
Wow.
And that really spoke to me. It's something, we all experience. We all have to experience pain in order to grow, in order to reach our potential.
It's interesting. We're talking about this for our listener listening right now. Melanie and I are actually recording this episode on September 11th, 2017, which marks the 16-year anniversary of such devastation in the United States, felt worldwide. Also, the past couple days, couple weeks, we've had 2 tremendous hurricanes that have done damage to the islands, Mexico, Texas, Florida, so many, all the whole chain of islands, and it's suffering, so to think of the violin string, and even to think of the pain I've had, and even for you, our listener, thinking the pain you felt, and some of it, looking back years, it all makes sense. The things we've been through to where we are now. That's
true. And also coincidentally, yesterday was, I think it was World Suicide Awareness Day.
Was it?
Yeah, and it's the National Suicide Awareness Week this week, which I think is kind of interesting. So, talk to people. Talk to people. If you are feeling this pain, you have every right to live your life to the fullest. My life now is wonderful, and I'm so glad I had this intervention because there really was nobody for me to talk to. But if you do have somebody to talk to, do that. And there are, of course, hotlines to call. So, yes, September 11th. It became exceedingly clear after the events of September 11th that I needed some discipline with all these things that kept happening to me. And just 2 days before 9/11, my current husband and I were wrapping up a vacation in Florida. My parents lived there, and we were with our 2-year-old son. And we were waiting in the airport, as you would for your flight. And I was just gazing off into space when I was suddenly jolted with, I don't know how to explain it. It was just an overwhelming sense of destruction and grief. I was actually pushed off balance by it. It was so overwhelming. I look back now, and I think I must have looked like Obi-Wan Kenobi when he felt Princess Leia's planet explode. It was like that. It was so powerful. And this feeling was so real. I immediately scanned my body to sense if it was personal, but it didn't feel that way. Of course, you would if you were in an airport and you sense this. I didn't know what to do, but because it didn't feel personal, I couldn't sense myself being involved. So I didn't tell my husband because he's superstitious. He would have canceled the flight.
Right.
And of course, 2 days later, it was 9/11, that Tuesday, and we watched these horrific events of death and destruction. But it really wasn't until a few days later that it was discovered that a couple of the hijackers came from Florida, that I put these 2 events together. These hijackers flew out of the same airport that my husband and I were in that previous Sunday. they were probably sitting right in front of me.
Right.
So since then, I regretted not having the discipline to further investigate my experience. I wish I knew. I mean, and since then, I've also heard so many premonitions of people who knew they weren't supposed to go work that day or get on that airplane. I've heard some really amazing ones from mediums. And I just wish now, I wish I knew what was going on with my intuition. And so I found myself working a few years later at a holistic conference center that was actually based on the Omega Institute here in Austin. It was called The Crossings. And I coordinated events with people like Dr. Brian Weiss. I sat in on his reincarnation workshop, and Stephen Schwartz. He's a remote viewing researcher. So I was like, what if my experiences were remote viewing? I mean, I had no clue. Were they astral travel? What were they called? What is this even about? And so I did all these classes and still couldn't find the answer. And during this time, the owners of the center I worked at hired some feng shui consultants who did Chinese horoscope readings, and they did them for the staff. And the reading they did blew me away with its accuracy. It revealed that somewhere down the road, I'd be a metaphysical teacher and that my future work will be focused online. And this is like at the the very beginning of the internet, and they were like saying, okay, you're going to be working. I was like, okay, yeah, right. Yeah. But it sparked my curiosity. I wanted to learn all I could about psychics and then mediums. I learned about what a medium does. And I took a 6-week introductory course here in Austin. It covered the whole gamut of modalities, from reading tarot cards to exploring past lives, animal communication, dowsing, mediumship, all that stuff. And from there, I discovered the snui.com. And now I'm here today on your podcast.
Oh, we talk about SNUI. Is it .com or .org?
Oh, is it?
.org.
Maybe it's .org.
.org, I think.
Okay, SNU. I just have it bookmarked, so I don't know.
Yeah, we talk about it. I've talked about it often because it's awesome.
Yeah, it's inexpensive, and the quality of the teachers I've experienced was really good, and I really enjoy it. It's a nice community. It's a really nice community, especially if you don't have any spiritualist church in your area where you live.
In that 19 Reasons to Believe in the Afterlife thing I created, the first thing was talking about evidential mediums, and I refer people to snui.org.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
I mean, it's just, it can be expensive, I think, people looking, and I think evidential mediums are great, don't get me wrong, but I know that the more online services you sit in on at SNUI, the more your chances of one of your loved ones coming through. And I'll never forget a beautiful, accurate message coming through from my dad, and then also from my grandmother, who I've never met. I mean, like spot on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I thought, and in US dollars, it's less than $30 a year to be part of that.
Depending on what the exchange rate is. And
really somewhere good recently. In that area. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a spiritualist to belong to it. You can, just go and check it out and attend the services and maybe get a reading or two. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Now, it's also a place to learn. Is that where you learned and got accredited and everything?
Yes, it is, through the platform accreditation scheme. I did a whole series of services as a speaker and as a medium. And then I had to be assessed. I failed my first assessment. Wow. And I had to retake it. Yeah, I was devastated, but I took it again, and that felt good. And because I'm accredited by them, now I can go sit for a certificate if I want to continue down that path. And I like education. I love learning. I love learning about this mediumship. I don't consider it a gift. I consider it something that everybody is capable of. I mean, to me, a gift is something that is given to you with no expectation of anything in return. And
Ah, I
I
like it.
feel, yeah, I feel if you're a medium, this is something God has placed in your lap and you are in service to spirit. If you are capable of doing this work, and I think we all are, but if you are interested in sitting through the classes and getting discipline and being a true voice for spirit, you should be giving that work to people. And of course, people, do it as for a living. For me, it's more of a religious thing. It's more
Hmm.
of a service. People can give me donations, but it's not something I'm trying to make a living out of. Absolutely not. I have a full-time job, but I'm able to do these things, so I have to do them. I have to draw spirit. I have to talk about people's guides. It's just something I have to
Hey,
do.
I have a full-time job also.
Yeah,
It's not this,
yeah,
but I have to
yeah,
do it. I have to have these conversations. I have to
yeah.
share them. I have
We
to
have
keep
to serve.
searching.
Excellent. That's excellent. And that makes life worth living, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
Finding
does.
your purpose and filling that void and being a voice for people. People have come to recognize you and feel like, they're friends with you. That's just beautiful. And you can probably save a life
Well,
and help
interesting.
people.
There have been people who have written that this show has saved their life, and I have no doubt, Melanie, that there's someone listening right now who needed to hear your story about the woman looking at you from across the river, maybe contemplating suicide. Our minds are so fragile, and it is so easy, I think, for us human beings to get sucked into the negative messages that our mind might tell us. And I
Right.
think that's why it's so important that we learn about grief, we learn about our minds, we get help, we talk to people to realize like that's not us. There's so much more.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And this is something that people have known for centuries. 225 years ago. I've recently been reading this biography of William Blake. He lived 225 years ago, and he said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite.
wow.
And the doors of perception is your sense of awareness. It's clouded, it's veiled by
Right.
materialism, it's veiled by thinking you are a separate self. A person who is a separate self, who buys into that, feels that they're better than somebody else.
Right.
Or they don't feel they're better than somebody else. They feel they're worse than somebody
Mm-hmm.
else, which is just as bad or
Mm-hmm.
even worse. And they work out of that self ego. They work out of making themselves feel better. But the person who feels, I am the same as you, we are one, is going to work out of the feeling that we're all in this together.
Right.
We have to love each other. And that is where I find peace, really. I find peace in knowing that when my senses go, when my body is no longer seen, I'm still going to be a part of awareness. I'm still going to be here. You can't get rid of me. I'm eternal.
Yes, I think we all are. And I don't doubt that at some point we all just kind of melt into consciousness, into all of it. I do think we spend a little time in, if you want to call it the afterlife or
Mm,
home. I like the word home because that just
right.
implies we're just visitors here, which I think we are. But I think there's learning every step of the way.
Oh, absolutely.
And I do think that some of these times of suffering and sadness can maybe crack open the shell, and it's interesting. There's some kind of a pine cone that needs severe heat for it to grow. And some of these most devastating forest fires, even though, they're devastating, but it takes that severe heat for that little pine cone to be able to grow into a new tree. And just talking about the suffering and talking about just what we're talking about here, the violin string, I think it all ties in beautifully. And in the moment, we may not understand it, but if it can start our journey to search for peace, to find God, like you said, it's a beautiful thing.
I didn't know that about that pine cone.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Very real.
And of course, controlled burning has been a part of nature forever too. And there's a purpose for that.
Yeah.
Wow. Learn something new every time I listen to your show, or I'm on your show.
Hey, you are.
What? That's so awesome.
Hey, I do this just for that. I love the connections I have with people, and I just love it. And we're a couple days away from going to that big Afterlife Symposium, which, again, you might listen to this a year from now, but whenever you listen, you can always feel free to go to afterlifestudies.org. There is a conference, a symposium, they call it, that's put on every year, which is the meeting of all the minds of cutting edge stuff that's happening in the world of the afterlife. And everybody's free to, well, free, it's not free, but it's not very expensive, but everybody's welcome to attend, and just what a great place. So I'm super excited to be there.
Oh, I know. I can't wait. Are you going to do your show from there?
I'm not going to do a show from there. There's lots of activities all week, but I'll certainly do the live Facebook something. I've never done the live Facebook stuff, but there's over 500 people attending, and the largest percentage, I believe, of attendees listen to this show. So I think I've got a few hugs to give, which I can't wait. Absolutely. I can't wait to meet everybody. I can't wait. So yeah, it'll just be great. And I do think what we're creating, though, is the tipping point, I guess you call it, where more people than not get to realize who we are and what life's about, and that our lives are for a reason, that we don't die. I remember being at the very beginning of my journey, petrified of telling anybody I'm interested in this. Petrified. Even when my book came out, I'm like, oh, what are people in my life going to think? And nobody thought I was crazy.
It's a scary feeling. It's that being stretched.
Yeah.
It's that violin string being stretched, and it feels uncomfortable, and you're getting out of your comfort zone, and you're almost becoming a new person. But if you're attached to that old person, that's where all the pain is going to be. So you've got to let those attachments go. If you invest so much in that life, in that identity, and once you just realize that your true identity is who you always have been. Do you remember when you were a little kid and you had these knowing flashes of brilliance?
It was an adventure.
Yeah.
It was like the drawing that you did for me. Exciting. Those are the words you put on it. Yeah, that's who I was. And I just wanted to share.
Yeah, and that's you.
That's me.
That same you was the same you that you were when you were that awkward teenager who just saw through all the bullshit of the adults around you.
Oh, there you swore. Now I got to turn it to the adult show. I warned Melanie before not to use any language, or else I have to make this a PG-13 show. No, it's okay. We can handle it.
You were the same. That was the same feeling.
Yeah,
when you were a child, when you were a teenager, and when you were an adult. When you were crying in the silence between your tears, that is the same I am that you were when you were a little kid. And you have these thoughts and you have these perceptions that cloud your doors of perception, and they're coming and going. But your core being, the ever-present awareness, is you.
Now you're talking to all of us, not just Sandra.
You. Not just Sandra.
All of us.
All of you. You assume this temporary form, and just as naturally, you release that form and you rejoin the river. And then it flows into the sea and we rejoin God. And that's who we are. Ultimately, we're expressions of God.
You think there's a point to all this thing that we call life? All the suffering, all the good, bad, and the ugly?
It's to discover this, that we are God. We are ultimately expressions of God. It's to make that connection, because in that peace, we find happiness. And I really do feel that's the purpose of life, is to reconnect with that core awareness, that peace and happiness that is inside every single person.
That's really beautiful. I was thinking, I don't remember who the people are, but I was thinking about happiness today, that you don't need things to happen in your life to be happy. You can be happy first. And some of the people, and I can't remember where it is, I think it's somewhere in Africa, a group of people that have the most amount of suffering, the most amount of death, the most amount of diseases, but they are the happiest people.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to do a little research on that. But, and I think part of our journey being humans on planet Earth is to not remember who we are, or else we couldn't have this adventure to search.
And I think one of the things that really helps us in this is to surrender. And I feel that is sometimes the hardest thing for people to do, is to simply surrender. And I'll tell you a story. I had a vision, and this was, I don't remember exactly, sometime during the last year, that I was walking along the road and I'd find a $20 bill. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I was just sort of like, maybe daydreaming. Mm-hmm. But it happened a few months later. I decided to take a walk. And usually I have this route that I take. And I was like, I'm going to surrender. I am just going to go where I feel guided to go. And sure enough, about 10 minutes later, I went up a street I never walked on, and there was a $20 bill on the sidewalk.
Oh, so cool.
And I picked it up and I was like, okay, the farmer's market is on today. I'm going to go spend this $20 and give it back to somebody who's worked hard, because I certainly didn't work hard for this. I just trusted my intuition. I surrendered. And, other things happen that leads me to really wonderful things. Once I start surrendering, really cool things start happening. And I think that. Yeah. And I had a lucid dream about falling. Mm-hmm. And I was falling through this pit, and I just sensed this tension and this horror. And then as soon as I sensed that tension and horror, my dream became lucid, and I said, relax. And my whole body just relaxed, and I was flying, and I was enjoying it. And every time I feel like I'm coming up against a wall or I'm coming up against a challenge, I think, now, surrender. What's going to happen? I think what's going to happen is what God intends to happen. And It's amazing to me that, it always ends up being good. Nothing bad has happened. Something bad happens when I go against what I'm hearing or feeling.
I can't help but think of the little song, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, merrily, merrily. Life is but a dream. And if you can picture trying to row upstream and how to trying to force yourself in one direction, it doesn't work so well.
Right.
Not so
exactly.
much, but to go with the flow, to surrender, right. Like you say, you might not understand, but to have the faith and trust that some people say the universe is always working in your behalf, and it may not feel that way sometimes.
I totally believe it.
Yeah.
So I'm a bicyclist, okay. And I love to ride my bike around town. And, Austin is in the middle of Texas, but it's hilly. There are a lot of hills. And I was going to ride my bike to this Buddhist meeting. Okay, this is before I started studying spiritualism, mediumship. And this voice in my head said, "Don't take the hill." And I was like, huh, yeah, right. I need the exercise. I'm going to take the hill. Of course, what happens? Flying down the hill, I hit some gravel. I end up in ER.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there I was. The ego was saying, "I know better than that." I'm going to, and it was just a mess. And it's those little things that remind me that my life isn't my own. I may think I have free will, but I don't.
How do we know, Melanie, if the voice we're hearing is our intuition, our spiritual selves, or if it is the ego?
My imagination is very strong. So I used to have a lot of trouble with that because I was constantly talking to myself in my head, but it's self-directed. All right. I'll come with a plan. I will have an idea. I would think it through. The voice that's intuition comes as if out of nowhere. And it may even sound like a different voice. I remember one story where I was engaged to my first husband, and we were living apart, and I was looking at the newspaper, and there was a story about a young man who was in an apartment fire. And I looked at the photograph, and I heard a voice. I was just reading the story and probably thinking about what I was going to have for dinner that night or whatever. But the voice said, "He needs your help." Now, that was not my voice. That was just out of nowhere. He needs your help. And I think that is also a real signal to what's intuition. It's a direct, no nonsense kind of, don't take the hill. You're going to find this $20 bill. It's just very direct. And long story short, I ended up marrying this guy.
Aha.
He needed my help. And I ended up getting married to my first husband, and separated. And while we were separated, I met this fellow, and we're still married today.
Oh, that's so sweet. Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, so what I acted on that, that because it was so firm and so direct, he needs your help. So I actually had a friend who lived at the same apartment complex, and I asked her about him, and I did some following up, but it turned out that it wasn't meant to be. The timing was not good. I had to go through other lessons first.
Interesting. Melanie, let's talk about some of the things that you offer in not your job, but your passion here. Sharing, because you're up to a lot. The first thing is I was on your Facebook page and I was looking at all the spirit drawings and the photographs of people, and the fact that I'm so proud of you that you use your artwork and you draw people's loved ones.
I'm not a trained artist. Like my sister taught me how to draw,
But that's okay.
My style is very naive. It's very cartoonish. It's very flat, but that's not a prerequisite for being a spirit artist. What is surrendering to spirit and letting your hand be guided on the page. And I will connect to spirit and let my hand just draw somebody, and I'll get information, names and places and memories, and eventually a message. And I will show the drawing to somebody, and they'll say, "Oh, I know exactly who that is," and show me a photograph or dig up a photograph. And that's really exciting because it's something I've been doing for years and years and not really knowing what I was doing when I was growing up. And now I realize it's a way to connect with spirit.
It seems like you capture the personality of the person. So because looking at the true photographs of people, I mean, obviously you're looking at them, you can see what they look like, but there's always like a personality that you can feel in the photograph and then in your drawing. Just to me, looking at these this evening, it's just like, oh, it's just you
Oh, thank
captured the
you.
personality of that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. That's really sweet. When I was, one of the things I like to do with friends, especially like in middle grade and in high
Hmm.
school, draw people in a cartoon caricaturistic kind of way. It's just try to capture their essence. And so hopefully that's something that comes through in spirit art as well. Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's great.
thank you.
And
Sweet of
what
you.
is colors of your question?
Colors of your question was an experiment that I devised when I was first on this path. I wanted to find a way to have people get interactive with the art and test my intuition. So I would ask them to devise a life question, and nothing that was yes or no, something that definitely had meaning in their lives, but not tell me what the question was. So I would never know what the question was. And so I would send them a list of colors. And from that list, they were to give me the first three that they saw. And from those colors, I would intuit the past, the present, and potential future of their life question
Wow.
and do a reading and draw a clear circle, which is what I call an orograph. An orograph is kind of, to me, kind of an old fashioned term for a drawing, which is basically psychic art. And I took an orograph class online, really enjoyed it, thought that was just really perfect. But I wanted it to be a way where the colors that a person chose really reflected them. I don't use textbook definitions of color. I use what the color means to them, for them in their situation, to their life question. And I spell colors the British way with the U because
Hmm.
you are in the colors. Aha.
Oh, I was wondering.
So yeah,
That's cool.
it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing that. Spiritual assessments, portraits, but I don't do it to make a living. I don't do
Right.
it. It's just something I really love to practice, and so
And you're
yeah,
a being of service.
yeah, exactly.
And I'd like to hear too about on snui.org. You teach an online development circle and
Hmm.
philosophy class. Can you talk about
Yeah.
those?
Well, it's every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. No, I'm sorry, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. I do a mediumship development circle. One of my mentors is Margaret Challenger, and she was an Arthur Findlay College tutor. She teaches the direct style of mediumship where you go directly, you're guided by spirit directly to your recipient. And it's a very natural style of communication. It's not really focused on lists and lists of evidence. It's more about what does spirit want to say to you?
Hmm.
And of course, you have to get the ID. And so that was very important. But, you want to have a chat and you want to have a nice reunion. And so I help people learn that style of mediumship. And then the last Wednesday of the month is a philosophy prayer writing class. And we use the 7 principles of spiritualism. And every month we'll just focus on one of those principles and write prayer around it. So since I'm a poet, I'm a published poet, I thought that I had the skills to talk about this. And I love prayer. I really do.
Let's talk more about that because I don't think it's something many of us do until unless we need something.
Oh, right. And
Like,
prayer is not just, asking for things. That's what most people think it is. God, I need $1 million.
or don't let the hurricane
God,
hit my
yeah.
house. Yeah,
Well, yeah, it's very egocentric.
right.
Um, when you pray for something that is beyond the ego, I believe that is where the power of prayer lies. When you pray for the benefit of all, I think truly, that is where we see the working of prayer. When you pray for the well-being of someone in the hospital, when you pray for the well-being of people being hit by these calamities and these devastating floods all over the world, prayer is very powerful. And I think when it comes to your own personal, egotistical, materialistic desires, it doesn't really, I'm going to have $1 million. Why do you want $1 million? To be happy? Well, you pray to be happy. And that's where you're going to find the results of your prayer.
And is the prayer more about the intention behind it as opposed to the
definitely.
words? Because I, as a Catholic girl, memorized all those prayers we had to say in church, and I never even remembered what it was I was saying. I mean, I never took the words in to my heart.
Because they're not written by people who really care about words. They're written for more of a political purpose, I believe. And when you create your own prayer, that is coming from your center. You're coming from your heart. It's coming from the heart of awareness. It's coming from your core being. And it really means something. And we talk a bit about that, and we talk about what the principles mean to us, and a little bit about what makes a good prayer. Repetition is something that is very useful in prayer, and poetry and lyrics. If you're going to be writing a song, you're going to have a chorus, you're going to have repetition, and repetition like a mantra. It's very powerful when you repeat those words.
Can anyone who's a member of SNUI go to your Wednesday night thing, or do you have to be part of a scheme or anything?
It's open. It's an open mediumship development circle.
That's great.
There's a core group of people who typically come every week, but it's open to new people. It's open to seasoned people. Hopefully you'll learn something a little challenging or something new. We usually have a discussion for the first 30 minutes, and then I cap it at 7 minutes for each demonstration. And so everybody will have a chance to have a link. And I do coaching too, so I'll coach people along the way.
Do people have to do it, or can they just listen?
No, absolutely not. You don't have to. No, I never force anybody to do it if they don't want to. But some of the newbies really do need some coaxing. So, and I think people are surprised.
I know all about that coaxing, because even though I've taken a few courses, I still consider myself a newbie that needs the coaxing.
Oh, but it's so beautiful when somebody holds you by the hand and leads you and, introduces you to spirit, because, these are people just like you and me. These are people who are right around you. Spirit is around us right now. And it's just surrendering, and it's just letting yourself be open and saying goodbye to your ego. Say goodbye to Sandra or whoever you are, and letting that spirit person come so close and blend so close that you're one.
I'll never forget that when I was at the Arthur Findlay College, I was in the newbie group, and the instructor said to this lady, "Okay, I want you to give Sandra a reading." And the woman was so scared, and she says, "No, I'm going to be right here by your side." And so she said, "Who do you see?" And of course the woman, thinking she's making up, she says, "Just say who you see." And she said, and she describes this man. Now, who would this man be to Sandra? She says, "I'm looking at him also. It would be her father." And I'm thinking, yes. Mm-hmm. And he wore a gold ring on his right hand. And I says, yes. And then she said, she pictured him wearing a hat and working in the travel business. And she says, "Now look harder. I'm looking. Now he's telling you what he does for a living." And she says, "Airline pilot." And I'm thinking, oh my God, And so this woman's thinking she's making it up. Uh-huh. I'm looking at her going, you could not have ever guessed this. There's just no way. And it all took the loving coaxing from the tutor. Mm-hmm. And so talk about giving that woman and me just the backbone that, what comes up in our imagination doesn't mean it's our imagination.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as you start working, everything is for the recipient. It's true.
That's
You
so
know,
beautiful.
it's not for you.
No, ma'am. Well, Melanie, our time is just about up. Is there a question I
Oh,
should have asked you, or something you want to share, or if you want to just tap into your own soul and anything, words of wisdom or prayer, or anything that you want to leave us with? And then we'll recap how people can get in touch with you and stuff
oh,
like that.
well, I think preoccupation with material things, with possessions, with your identity, with thoughts and perceptions, really just let those things go, at least for, doesn't, you don't have to like meditate for hours. Just let that all go and know that you are, you are awareness, and you have that within you, and that has never left you. It will never leave you. You are eternal.
I'm just smiling. I've got that kind of Buddha smile on my face right now. And
Oh,
surrender.
surrender. Surrender is not a weakness. Surrender is strength.
How does
You have to.
meditation, just before we finish,
Uh,
I just feel like you need to speak a few minutes about quieting the mind. Could you? Whether you call
well,
it
it's
meditation or,
it's not really about quieting the mind. It's about realizing that what is happening in your body and mind, your body mind together, is temporary.
hmm,
Is, you will have this headache, but the headache will go. You will have these thoughts, these recurring thoughts, but they don't last. What you were thinking about 2 minutes ago is not the same thing you're thinking about now. What you're feeling in your body is going to dissipate and go. It's not real. It's just temporary. It's like watching the clouds floating through the sky. Don't become attached to those because they're going to disappear.
okay,
What you really want to pay attention to is that feeling that you are aware. And that same awareness has been with you since you can remember. And it's going to be there when your body is gone and your thoughts are gone, your mind is gone, whoever you are is going to disappear. But the core of your awareness is still going to be with you, or is still going to be a part of all that is. And I think that really leads me to a lot of peace. It leads me to a feeling of, I just can't be happier. Just can't be happier. I'm just so happy. And you don't have to still your mind. You just have to realize that these thoughts come and go, and they are not what you are. You have thoughts, but you're not a thought. You have feelings and emotions, but you are not your feelings and emotions. You're so much more than that.
that's beautiful. Thank you, Melanie.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about your blog. You
Mm-hmm.
say that your blog for developing mediums, but anybody
Mm-hmm.
can go to your blog and
Oh,
check
yeah.
out
Yeah.
your words. And
Yeah.
Melanie Alberts medium
Medium.
dot
Mhm.
blogspot.com, or simply go beneath this episode and there's a live link, or your Facebook
Yeah.
page, facebookbook.com / Melanie Alberts Spirit Portraits.
Right. And if you go to my blog, on the sidebar, there's a little place where you can send me a message. And if you mention that you heard this show or just want to read about my story, I've got a 7-page PDF that basically sums it all up.
Beautiful.
And I also have it. I read it recently and recorded that on SoundCloud. So if you prefer me reading it, that's also available. So yeah, just as like a little gift to your listeners,
We
I'd be
like
very happy.
gifts.
Yeah, I'd be happy to send that
We
to your
like gifts.
friends.
So go to melaniealbertsmedium.blogspot.com or just beneath this episode, and people can just simply email you. And they can also email you if they'd like to perhaps inquire about a reading or service with
Oh
you.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, sure.
through the blog. Yeah, that'd be the best place
Okay.
to reach me.
Do you do the drawings and things like that? Do you have to be face to face with someone, or can you talk to
No, no.
somebody?
I like using Zoom. There's a service called Zoom,
I don't know
and
Zoom. I like the
Zoom,
word though.
yeah,
Zoom, zoom, zoom.
Zoom Room. Yeah, it's really good,
What
and
is
it
Zoom?
records it. It's like Skype,
Okay.
and it videotapes, it records it, so I can record it and do a transcript later, and I can draw and show through the video. I can show the drawing as it happens,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
that's really helpful.
How do people have to get
Mhm.
the Zoom though?
Oh, I
Easy
send
enough?
them a link. I send them a
Oh,
link.
okay. So it's nothing,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
hard work on
No,
the
no, you
recipient's
just
part.
you have
You
to
just
go
click
to
on it.
Zoom. Yeah, I think you have to like download it, but it's very simple. It
Okay.
just says, just click here, and then you'll be good to go.
And you did that whole spiritual assessment and drawing on me without
Without, yeah,
anything from me.
no, it
And it
had nothing
was
to do with you. It had
right
to do with our
on.
guides.
Your people talking to my people.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, they
I
had lunch.
They did. They had lunch. Tell her this. And you did. It was awesome. Well, Melanie, thank you for being our guest today.
Oh, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate talking to you about my passions.
Fantastic. Yeah, me too. I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. Did I say love it? And also for our listener, thank you for being here. And without a doubt, I know that you may be experiencing a tough time. And just think of that violin string being tuned or the pine cone, and just know that your life is for a purpose. Pain can lead us to search for peace and to find God, as Melanie said. Just beautiful. And I do invite you to sign up on the website, wedon'tdieradio.com, for the Insiders Club. So not only do I have that 19 reasons to believe in the afterlife, but also I've got a very healing audio called How to Survive Grief. And also, if you'd like to read my book, it's a PDF file there, complimentary for you. And there's a lot of healing stuff in that as well, and inspiring, so it's all there. And another great reason to go to Facebook is we now have a group, our group called cancel that. We have a group called We Don't Die Listeners. That's what you type into the search box. And it's a lot of people in there now, but I love it because somebody could be posting about having a loss, and there's 100 people there to support them, and it's over 2,000 people in the group. I know Melanie is now in it, and it's just a nice place to be to talk about the things that we talk about on the show. There are people that are interested in this. They might not be in your life that you see face to face on a daily basis, and that's okay. There are people that care about you, that love you, that want to keep this conversation going. So I invite you to join us there. In closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I've been delighted to be your host on We Don't Die Radio. And I do believe that life is an education for the soul, and that your life here on earth is important. So I really want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.